The Eyes of Texas.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of The Eyes of Texas. I'm Ron Stone, and we're glad to have you with us as we take a trip around the state to look at the sights and to meet the people. This week, the Eyes of Texas cameras have been to Galveston to see the historic Strand turned into a scene out of Victorian England. To the Big Bend to walk down a dry creek bed looking for Indian pictographs. To South Padre Island to check on a museum dedicated to the marvels of marine biology. To Washington County to meet some folks who prove that you really can go home again. We began just about as close to Cajun country as you can get, over in Jefferson County, where the spirit of the entrepreneur is alive and well.
C.O. Wilson Junior High, home away from home for 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders in Nederland. A typical bunch of 12 to 15-year-olds. The girls are beginning to have boys on their minds. The boys have something on their minds. Most of them just haven't figured out what it is yet. T.J. Van Auken is among the fairly typical in most respects. He makes good grades, A's and B's. He also spends a lot of time with his computer. He likes to swim when it isn't too cold. And he likes to work. He's always liked to work.
Always, always. He's bored if he's not doing something.
He does things, especially around the house, without being told. He helps whenever we ask him, but he'll do a little extra, probably to show he likes to work. He has a little bit more drive than a lot of teenagers. You have to tell him 3 or 4 times to do something. If you tell him once, he'll do it most of the time. If he sees something that needs to be done, most of the time you don't have to tell him to do it, and he takes it on himself to do a few things other than what we tell him to do.
Talk about helpful. TJ even offers to help his big sister try to start the lawnmower. But TJ's most time-consuming endeavor these days, outside of school, is his boudin business, the one he took over on the 1st of June, 1985. But let's back up 3 years. TJ's parents decided to go into business for themselves with this store in 1982. They remodeled the back of the store and leased it out to a man who wanted to make and sell boudin to go. Boudin's the Cajun-style sausage made with rice and pork and some other things. TJ helped out in the store. He was 12 at the time. He got a paper route, and with the money from that, he bought his computer and a motorcycle. He gave up his paper route after 1.5 years, telling his mother he wanted a job with greater cash flow. His mother tried to tell him that no one could hire him because he was so young, still only 14. Still, he worked as a baker for a while, and all the while watching the Cajun chef become more and more discouraged with a business that was not as successful as he had anticipated. Finally, TJ made him an offer, and they reached an agreement just as school was letting out in the spring of '85. At 14, TJ became the youngest member of the Texas Restaurant Association.
TJ wasn't satisfied with the back, so he remodeled more. And he got it exactly like he liked. And the business, with TJ running it, has been very successful. He's tripled the business since he bought it. And for a 14-year-old, that was fantastic. He was only used to making $200 a month, delivering newspapers.
I was a little scared at first, but it wasn't really that hard to begin with. Just, I wanted to cook since I was about 7 years old. And so I started cooking in July or June, somewhere around there. And then he wanted to get out of it, so I decided to go ahead and see if I could do it. And I guess it worked out.
TJ came by his passion for work naturally. It isn't unusual for Ty Van Auken to spend more than 100 hours a week in the store. And Bobby Van Auken has been working 24 hours on and 24 off as an LVN nurse for years. TJ does have help. Joni Welch lends a hand during the day while he's in school. But he's the boss. He does it all. He cooks up 80 pounds of boudin every other day. Some people may take issue with his spelling of the word, but no one so far has taken issue with the taste of his boudin.
He started cooking when he was 7. He just started getting cookbooks and cooking. His dad has always cooked, and we've had older children live with us, and they cooked. On my father's side, TJ's great-grandmother, during the Depression, would use a hollowed-out bullhorn and stuff boudin with it then and go door to door and sell it so that they could survive. I'm learning how to cook now.
Bobby says TJ's the best renter they've ever had. He keeps the place spotless, and he pays the rent on time. From here, after high school graduation, TJ would like to study culinary arts at Cornell University in New York, and then go to Paris, where his great uncle runs a cooking school. No doubt TJ Van Auken will be back and well known on the restaurant scene before you know it.
Enterprising young fella. Yeah, he sure is.
For 16 years, Doug Baker was an engineer in Beaumont, and for about the same length of time, his wife was in the advertising business there. But they were really small-town folks at heart, and one day they decided they just wanted to go home again.
I think really that you've got to get away. You've got to see other things and have other experiences before you can appreciate what you've had. And I know that was with us. We didn't realize how beautiful the Brenham area is until we got out and saw other areas. And just, I guess our values changed too. We left, we were kids, and when we came back, we had a real appreciation for the heritage in the area and the people and the quality of life. And that's all real important.
Doug and Gail Baker grew up together in Brenham. They graduated from Brenham High and moved away for a while, but their hearts never left the rolling hills of Washington County.
Brenham is where we always wanted to be. In the past 5 years, it was getting more and more difficult to go back to Beaumont, especially when the bluebonnets were blooming and everything was so pretty. So we finally decided it was something had to be worked out to where we could move back here.
They call their place Country Revivals, and it's headquartered in an old building on the courthouse square that housed a private bank back in the mid-1800s. Gail is a consultant as well as a shop owner. She sells early Texas to people in the form of furniture and quilts and bonnets and memorabilia. She also sells antiques, and if she doesn't have something in the building here, she can usually find it. Her family has always been in the antique business. She has hundreds of unfinished projects in the back room waiting for her attention, and since we were there, Gail tells us that she has added some pretty remarkable tenants to the place. Some antique dealers, some artisans, even an eatery. She had only one artisan there when we were there, and that was husband Doug, and that was only part-time. Doug works for the city, but he has his own antique workshop in the basement of the building where he fixes what can be fixed and creates some very special woodwork with an unusual assortment of antique tools.
You could have the fun of collecting, something which a lot of people do, and yet you could use what you collected. It didn't just sit up on the shelf somewhere and you dusted it off every once in a while, and these things could really be used.
The economic downturn in Beaumont several years ago made it easy for Doug and Gail Baker to change professions and move back home. Some people try all their lives to move back, and it never works out. But Brenham seems to be booming right now, and business is good at the Country Revival store on the square.
Pretty easy to go home again when you're going back to a nice place like Brenham. Let's go south of there now to South Padre Island. Pan American University was founded in Edinburgh in 1927. It expanded to Brownsville in '73, and a year later, the Brownsville campus opened a lab on the southern tip of Padre Island. The Pan American University-Brownsville Marine Biology Laboratory studies the plants and animals living in the Gulf of Mexico around South Padre Island. The lab is used primarily for research and teaching and learning. It's also open to the public and has displays of flowering plants and seaweeds and the creatures that inhabit the Gulf.
They're not hungry, they don't eat. Everything that you find in the tanks, everything in the museum room or in the entryway is collected locally within a couple of miles of here. So the other biologists and I do most of the collecting. Other things are donated, particularly the bait shrimpers have been particularly good about saving specimens for us as they go out.
Do you find that people who visit here are surprised that there are this many different varieties right here locally in the Gulf?
Yes, even some of the local people are surprised. And of course, we don't have it all by any matter of means. We've got just a sampling, just whatever we can happen to pick up. But most of the time, there's about 100 different things in the tanks. And of course, what people see depends on how long they're willing to look and how intense they want to look. Some people spend an hour or two in here looking and don't see it all. Other people come in and within 5 minutes they've seen all they want to see and they're gone.
Not everyone is excited to find out that all of these creatures and more inhabit the waters of the Gulf around South Padre. In some cases, the people just soon not know. But in here, the people and the creatures can look at each other with curiosity, not alarm, and both are safe. This is a dry creek bed. They call it Comanche Creek. You say there's not very much here. And I suppose there isn't unless you have a real good guide, and we had one. Ray Duncan found some amazing things to tell us about at Comanche Creek.
Just pick your best way through, ladies.
This thing is usually bone dry, I would guess.
Normally bone dry, except in the rainy season.
And that's when?
Right now.
We were looking for pictographs, Indian paintings, embedded in the limestone walls above the ancient creek bed. And Duncan, who's an expert on the subject, directed the search. Several dozen Indian paintings, 10 or 12 feet above the floor of the creek, were barely visible on the walls. They were concentrated in the area of the creek that must have been about 100 feet wide. No one knows why they're here. Some of the rock art has been dated to 1000 A.D. The Comanche Creek site had been written about since the 1930s.
That rock's been cracked apart.
We were there to view the paintings and to talk to Ray about the people who spent time living in these parts.
I've been up so much. It's really hard to understand what these people were thinking about. Sometimes we find the rock art that seems to have a lot of religious undertone. But the way I interpret this one, I interpret this as the Chisos Mountains. If you were to stand out in the flat close to here, this is what the mountains would look like. And this is the moon and the sun rising, and that's where it rises over the Chisos Basin. These are the little teepees. So this would show maybe a campsite in relationship to the Chisos Mountains. Now, if we looked at the ground today in that area, we would find in relationship to the Chisos, this would be the area of Castellan, where the mouth of Santa Elena Canyon comes out. And there is a huge Indian village there, prehistoric Indian village. The ledge has quite a few different pictographs on it. Here we find some more of the triangles, which may tell us that that's probably a village. These right here are handprints. Of course, like I said, they've been long since deteriorated by the sun and the weather.
Ray, based on what you know about what these pictographs tell us and the history that you've read of the area, if we went back to, 1,200 years ago, what would these people be like? What kind of Indians are we talking about?
Well, I would think that these are probably extreme movers. These people did not stay in one spot very long. They're showing many different campsites here, so we're going to say that these people were not stationary. They also, major things in the horizon affected them. That's why, obviously, they're showing a pictograph of the Chisos Mountains. It was a very important area. That may be where they hunted.
Don't you imagine it was about as difficult a life as anybody ever
Oh,
had
I can imagine. You know, it's not easy today, by any means. But early man in this area had a very rugged struggle to stay alive. The foods that he ate would not be palatable to us. The weather also is very extreme. This area went through a drying process about 12,000 years ago and changed drastically. And that's what's so upsetting to me, is to look back at the history of early man here. The Ice Age hunter that came into this area and actually changed his lifestyle to live in it was completely wiped out by the Comanches and Apaches later on when they moved through here. So we lost that segment of man who had learned to cope with the Big Bend, and we had a new survivor that came on the scene that didn't live here. He just used it as a path, a roadway to get to his other riches, which were the Mexican ranches in northern Mexico.
Ray says the red art was produced by cinnabar. The black was probably etched out with sticks of charcoal. It's been here for hundreds of years, and it's not so unusual in this country. There are 4 other recorded sites in the general area, but Duncan is having trouble preserving the paintings. The bright sun and the occasional vandalism is damaging enough, but even left alone, the limestone continues to crumble every year. Every time that sand rock crumbles, a piece of Texas history disappears. It seems to be a natural phenomenon that we're helpless to prevent. Every year, early in December, thousands of people gather in Galveston for an event known as Dickens on the Strand. It's a colorful time featuring food and music and people dressed in costumes of the time of Scrooge and Tiny Tim.
There's a blizzard coming. Be prepared. Get back to your hearths.
Dickens on the Strand happens one weekend in early December. It's one of the fine new traditions of Lone Star Christmas time. Galveston is about 50 miles southeast of Houston, where Interstate 45 runs into the Gulf. I'm Ron Stone. Thanks very much for joining us, and we hope you have a good week.
The Eyes of Texas Texas Road Maps, featuring scenic roads and special places. Available for $2 from the Eyes of Texas, Box 2222, Houston 77252. The Eyes of Texas.